Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 3 with on the Arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 66-9 with this deck, so I've been grinding an absolute ton with this to try and hit rank 1. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to push past rank 3, so massive props to whoever's in the top 2 right now, absolutely killing it, but either way, this deck has felt really strong and very consistent to me as well. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, we'll have the full deck list there that you can import into Arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck for MTG Zone Premium that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how to change the deck for best of 1, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Jund Harvest Ring mid-range deck in Historic. So since the release of Lord of the Rings, outside of the combo decks like Yawgmoth and Kethis, I definitely feel like the most powerful thing to be doing in the format right now is the One Ring plus Shieldred. So One Ring, probably the most powerful card in the format right now. If it's left unchecked, it just completely runs away with the late game in terms of card advantage. And if you pair it with Shieldred, it basically just mitigates all the downsides of it, gaining you a ton of life. And if you can set this combo up, you're basically guaranteed to win the game. Speaking of which, Shieldred obviously very good with your own One Ring, but is also really good against opposing One Rings, and One Ring mirror matches are incredibly common right now, so Shieldred as a hate piece in these One Ring mirror matches is super important. Now I'm really high on running 4 copies of both of these because they're by far and away the most high impact cards in your deck in basically every single matchup, and you really want to find the first copy as consistently as possible. Running the full 4 copies of both makes you better against discard spells, better against counter spells because you have the redundancy for these, and they're also pretty good to draw in multiples as well, right? You do want to have multiples of the One Ring so that you can legend roll it once you've taken a lot of damage. Additionally, if you want to have protection again for a single turn, having the second copy is really nice. And then similarly with Shieldred, you know, if you have an unanswered Shieldred in play, you're really likely to win the game because it's such a powerful card. And having a second copy in your hand as a backup is pretty good, so if the opponent does find a piece of removal, you have the second copy there. One of the other slight downsides of running the full 4 copies of both, though, is that if you do want to get rid of the second copy with Crucius, naming Expedient is pretty risky because you're fairly likely to find a land. But in this particular build, we're running a single copy of Will, so that if we do have a Shieldred, for example, in our hand that we want to get rid of, we can just pitch it to Crucius, name Ambitious, and find Will, which is super high impact in the format right now. Speaking of which, another reason why I'm very high on running the full 4 copies of both is because with this setup, we're fairly likely to find a Shieldred or a One Ring if we discard a 3-drop naming Ambitious with Crucius, but we can also discard our 4-drops to name Will, and running the full 4 copies of both maximize our chances of having at least one of them in hand, so that if we do want to find Will, we can just go Crucius on turn 3, discard a Shieldred or a One Ring, name Ambitious to tutor Will, and then we have a treasure token, so as long as we have our 4th land, we can then just cast Will on turn 4. And the main reason why I'm super high on this card right now is that it can just steal opposing One Rings and Shieldreds, which is such a big tempo swing in these One Ring mirror matches. Outside of that, obviously there's a ton of creatures in the format with mana value 4 or less that you can steal as well. Even if the Will dies, you get to keep the card until the end of your next turn, which is really sick. If the Will does survive, though, you can obviously just specialize it to then sacrifice whatever you steal. And additionally, it also has nice utility alongside the One Ring because it gives you a way to get rid of your own One Rings. You know, say you're taking a lot of damage off it and you haven't found your second copy to legend rule it, you can just cast the Will and then specialize it to sacrifice the One Ring to get rid of it anyway. So Will, super high impact, and I feel like the first copy of this has so much value. Then outside of that, we've obviously got 4 copies of Crucius, which is probably the second most powerful card in the format right now, and then if this is left unchecked, it just completely runs away with the game in terms of card selection, in terms of ramp as well. And because Shieldred and One Ring is such high impact, being able to use Crucius to consistently find them is really good. And then, as I mentioned, being able to find Will is super important as well. So with 4 Crucius, 4 Shieldred, 4 One Ring, we have such high impact cards that it's really hard for a lot of decks to outgrind us. Speaking of other cards that are incredibly high impact, Orcish Bowmasters is another incredibly good card in the format right now. Very good against opposing One Rings if you can flash it in, because it just punishes the opponent for drawing a bunch of cards, obviously. If any decks is still running 1 toughness creatures, like against Devotion, this is really good at taking out their elves and stuff like that. But even outside of that, you know, you can ambush a lot of bigger creatures in combat. Like if the opponent attacks with the Crucius, for example, you can flash this in, deal a damage to the Crucius, and then just double block it. And then it's just really good against decks that are drawing as part of the game plan as well. So Bowmaster's super good in the vast majority of matchups, you know, especially against control as well. Being able to flash this in and then punishing them for drawing cards is really good as well. So Bowmasters, alongside Shieldred and the One Ring, is like the most impactful cards in the format generally right now. Then in terms of the green splash, I'm really high right now on Abundant Harvest and Jarstall. So Abundant Harvest fixes a lot of issues with this deck, because if you look at the curve, it's kind of weird for a historic deck, right? Before the release of Lord of the Rings, you probably wouldn't think that you would want to be running 8 4-drops and a 5-drop in your mid-range deck, and that does come with some issues in terms of the number of lands, right? So in straight Rakdos, you obviously have Crucius, Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, and potentially Seasoned Pyromancer as ways to filter your draws, which kind of helps mitigate the lands issue a little bit. But with such a high curve in this deck, the lands are definitely an issue, right? 24 is a decent amount to help you stop flooding out, but you really need to find your third land on curve to be able to go Crucius or Jarstall, because missing your third land drop is a disaster. And then similarly, if you have a Shielded or a One Ring, you really want to hit your fourth land on curve as well. And in a 24 land deck, that's not that likely to happen. So Abundant Harvest, first of all, is so good at helping with that issue to just ensure that you hit lands when you need to. You know, consistency with these sorts of decks is so important. Missing your third land when you have a Crucius is a nightmare. Missing your fourth land when you have a Shielded or a One Ring is a nightmare. So Abundant Harvest, being able to find lands when you need, is so important, and also means that we don't need to run that, you know, that higher land count either. You know, typically with Abundant Harvest in decks, you can use this as a way to lower your land count in general, but in this particular deck, I like running 24 lands alongside the 4 Harvest, because if we do need a land, we can use it. But in general, I'd much rather use Harvest to find non-lands. And speaking of which, another really nice upside of Harvest is that because we have so many high impact cards, right? I think Bowmasters, Crucius, Shielded, and One Ring are probably some of the most high impact cards in the format. Running 4 Abundant Harvest basically allows us to run slightly more than 4 copies of each of these, because it enables us to more consistently find them, right? If we go Harvest, name non-land, and find a Crucius, that's so good. If we find a Shielded or a One Ring or a Bowmasters, that's really, really good as well. So Abundant Harvest not only smooths out our mana situation, which is really important in a deck with a slightly weird curve like this, but is also really good because it allows us to find our very high impact 4-ofs slightly more consistently. And then on top of that, it's also really important to be able to enable Jarstall, which is the other main reason in the main deck that we're in green. And I'm really high on Jarstall right now as a 3-drop, just because I feel like it has an immediate impact on the game. So if you're running straight red-black, you would probably be running Fable of the Mirrorbreaker in this slot, which is still a good card. If I was running just straight Rakdos, I would definitely be running Fable, but the main reason why I really like Jarstall instead is it just has an immediate impact on the game on turn 3, which is really important, right? If we go Jarstall and then, you know, Thoughtseize, get rid of something impactful, or Fatal Push, kill something, even Jarstall Abundant Harvest to find a non-land, finding us like a Crucius or a Shielded or a One Ring is so good. So Jarstall I prefer over something like Fable because it has an immediate impact on the game, whereas Fable is kind of the Rakdos' version of Abundant Harvest, right? Fable comes down on turn 3, doesn't really do anything that impactful that turn, but then provides some consistency, and I would much rather have my consistency improving cards be at the 1 mana slot, and then have my 3-drops have an immediate impact on the game, if that makes sense. Now, if you look at how the deck's built, we have 12 1-drops, which I think is super important. You know, that's one of the other main reasons why I'm very high on 4 Abundant Harvest right now, and I've built the deck in a way where Jarstall is going to consistently hit that 1-drop, right? I think it's a mistake, well, particularly because we're only running 3 copies. The main reason I'm only running 3 copies is because it's not great to draw in multiples, really, and the deck isn't super built around it, because a lot of Jarstall decks in the past have run 12 1-drops, 12 2-drops to try and guarantee that 1-drop into 2-drop off Jarstall, whereas I think, you know, particularly in this deck where we really want to be running 4 of each of the 4-drops, because they're so high impact, I think the most important thing with Jarstall is just guarantee that you have a 1-drop in the graveyard on the turn 3, and then it's nice upside if you can get back like a Go for the Throat or an Orcish Bowmasters, if that makes sense. And like I said, you know, not running 4 copies because it's not great to draw in multiples in most scenarios, and we're not fully built around it because we have a slightly higher curve, so it is more difficult to go into, you know, 2-drop into 3-drop off Jarstall. But Jarstall coming down, hitting a Fatal Push or Thoughtseize or Abundant Harvest, or any of our sideboard cards. You see our whole sideboard is 1 mana as well, to enable Jarstall to have higher impact post sideboard. So I definitely like this card a lot because it has such impact the turn it comes down. And in terms of the interaction, 4 Fatal Push is just the best interaction in the format right now, particularly alongside Crucius. You know, being able to go Crucius, create a treasure, and then hold up Revolt Fatal Push is so powerful in so many different matchups right now. Thoughtseize is incredibly impactful right now as well. You know, I'm not very high on Inquisition of Kozilek right now because it can't hit Shielded or One Ring, so maxing out on Thoughtseize, and, you know, again, another reason why I really like Abundant Harvest right now, because we don't have to run worse versions of other cards, right? We don't have to run Inquisition. We can run Abundant Harvest, which then more consistently finds our Thoughtseize, if that makes sense. And then we've also got 4 copies of Go for the Throat. So I wanted to have 4 copies of 2-mana instant speed interaction that can kill most bigger creatures as well. Mainly because in the mirror match, I feel like killing Crucius before it triggers is so important. You know, going second, if you don't have a way to kill Crucius and the opponent just taps out for it, you immediately fall pretty far behind. So I feel like having 4 copies of this kind of unconditional removal is super important. And also, I also feel like it's just generally important right now because, especially on the ladder, there's going to be decks running bigger creatures. So having Catch-all Lancers, particularly against decks like Reanimator, is super important. Now, Go for the Throat is my card of choice here, but I think it's quite close. The other 2 options you could consider are Heartless Act and Power Word Kill. Power Word Kill I'm not particularly high on because it doesn't hit, but especially Atraxa and Serra's Emissary against the Reanimator decks. That's a really big blind spot to have that I don't think that card's worth running. But I do think it's very close between Heartless Act and Go for the Throat. So Go for the Throat obviously has a blind spot against the Artifact decks, but I've basically faced no Affinity or Artifact decks since Lord of the Rings came out. And I do feel like I have had a few situations where Heartless Act has been blanked. So against the Samwise combo decks, them escaping Woe Strider is something that Heartless Act can't kill. I was originally running Heartless Act and I was facing, I think it was Crokies who was on Jund Yorgmoth, and they managed to fizzle Heartless Act. I targeted their Mayhem Devil by putting a -1/-1 counter on one of their creatures with Yorgmoth. And then there's obviously stuff like Thalia's Lieutenant as well. So in general, I just felt like there were more cards that get blanked by Heartless Act than Go for the Throat. And we're also running 3 Haywire Might in the sideboard. So if we do face an Artifact deck, we can just cut them for Haywire Might. So we have cards to substitute there anyway. So Go for the Throat, definitely my preference of choice. But you could run Heartless Act. I think it's pretty close there, to be honest. And then in terms of the mana base, as I mentioned, 24 lands has felt like a good amount. We very rarely flood out with this. And then Abundant Harvest really does a lot of the legwork to ensure that we're hitting our 3rd and 4th land on curve when we need to. In terms of the lands themselves, we've obviously got a ton of dual lands. You know, I'm not very high on running Pathways in this deck because you really want to have multiple, you know, have all of your lands be able to produce both colours. I'm running 8 fast lands, which I feel are important to not take too much damage. You know, we are running the full 12 shock lands, which I feel are important to be able to hit all 3 colours consistently, but you really don't want to be damaging yourself a lot with the 1 ring. So I do like running the 8 fast lands, but you really don't want to be running more than the 8 fast lands because we obviously want to have untapped lands on turn 4 for shielded or 1 ring. So 8 has felt like a good amount to me overall. And then, you know, single copy of Haunted Ridge to hit our mana requirements. You know, we have double black for Shielded, but I also want to find red on turn 3 very consistently for Jarsel and Crucius as well. Single basic land I still feel is very important right now because I do still see Field of Ruin and Demolition Field occasionally. And then Boseiju, very nice as a utility land, as is Takenuma as well, you know, particularly because we have a lot of legendary creatures. Being able to rebuy your Shieldeds and your Crucius and your Jarsels are really important as well. So mana bases felt really nice. You know, Abundant Harvest does pull a lot of the legwork, but 24 lands has felt really nice overall. So that's the main deck. I've been really high on it. I feel like Abundant Harvest really improves the consistency here. I really like Jarsel as an immediate impact on the game, and I'm very high on just running the full 4 copies of Shielded 1 Ring because they're just so high impact in these games in general. Then in terms of the sideboard, we've got a lot of 1 mana cards here. First of all, because, you know, post sideboard, I typically don't tend to want to board out of the more expensive stuff. You know, I basically never board out of Crucius, Jarsel, Shielded 1 Ring. Occasionally I board out of Will, and sometimes I board out of Go for the Throat. But for the most part, I'm typically trimming 1-drops, and I feel like post-sideboard it's really important to have at least 12 1-drops so that the Jarsel is very consistent at, you know, casting something immediately on turn 3. In terms of the 1-drops themselves, we've got 3 copies of Cut Down, which is really good against a lot of the creature decks right now. You know, very good against Wizards, very good against the Samwise combo decks, very good against Mono Green Devotion, being able to hit their turn 1 elf. Very good against goblins. You know, just generally the decks where Thoughtseize is slightly less high impact and you want to bring in some extra 1 mana removal, Cut Down is really good there. And we got 4 copies of Duress for the control and combo matchups. You know, typically against control, we want to board out of our creature removal, so we just bring in Duress there, and then Duress into Jarsel is a really powerful curve out. You know, strip away the opponent's removal, get a Jarsel down, flash back the discard spells, just completely clean out the opponent's hand is really strong. So Duress really important to that end. Much prefer this over something like Mind Spike because we really don't want to be damaging ourselves too much with the 1 ring, if that makes sense. Then we've got 3 copies of Haywire Might. So this is another big reason to be in green right now, because in green and also white, you know, you could consider Mardu, and I did test that as well, but one of my big problems with just straight Rakdos right now is I don't feel like straight Rakdos really has great ways to deal with a resolved 1 ring. You know, you obviously have Cast into the Fire, but I feel like that's, you know, so, well, I guess it's just pretty narrow in my opinion, right? It's only very good if the opponent has a One Ring or a Bowmasters in the mirror match, whereas in green we have Haywire Might and Terror Sunder. And the reason I've gone for Haywire Might over Terror Sunder is, first of all, as I mentioned, it's really important to have 12 1-drops post-sideboard with Jarsil so it consistently triggers on turn 3. And in the mirror matches, I'd never want to board out of anything above the 1-drop slot. Go for the Throat is so important, killing Crucius. Bowmasters is really good in the mirror. Crucius and Jarsil are great. Shielded and One Ring is great, as is Will. So typically in the mirror match, I'm trimming on 1-drops. You know, another nice upside of Abundant Harvest is I normally trim down to 2 of these. You know, I still want to keep 2 in so that we essentially have 26 lands post-sideboard, but Abundant Harvest does make sideboarding a little easier because I'm always happy to trim the first 2 copies. And so in the mirror match against other One Ring mid-range decks, I typically board down 2 Abundant Harvest and a single copy of Thoughtseize. I still think Thoughtseize is important in the mirror matches because Shielded and One Ring are such high impact cards, but obviously a lot of the mid-range mirror matches come down to top decks, and Thoughtseize can be a bit of a dead top deck, or if the opponent has a One Ring going, Thoughtseize doesn't really do that much if they're drawing a bunch of cards each turn. So I typically board down 2 Harvest, down 1 Thoughtseize, and in 3 Haywire Might, which then consistently enables the Jarsil on turn 3. Now, you might think that Haywire Might doesn't really enable Jarsil because it's unlikely to be in the graveyard by turn 3, but in the mirror matches against other One Ring decks, it's very important for them to kill the Haywire Might because One Ring is like the deciding card in these One Ring mirror matches. And so if the opponent has a One Ring in hand, they're very incentivized to kill this. You know, if you play a Haywire Might on turn 1, opponents are very likely to fatal push it. And even if they don't have a One Ring in hand, they know that One Ring is the important card to be able to help them pull ahead. And so Haywire Might gets killed in the first 2 turns very consistently to the point where Jarsil bring back Haywire Might is very common. And then additionally against the Rakdos builds, if you're going second, you can play the Haywire Might and then use it to kill their Fable of the Mirror Breaker at the end of their turn 3. And then going into your turn 3, you can go Jarsil, bring it back as well. So Haywire Might works really well with Jarsil. And then also just gains you life, which is really nice with the One Ring. You can use it to kill your own One Rings and gain a bit of life back, which is really nice. Now, the one downside of this over Terror Sunder is that specifically against mid-range decks that are running Karn, which I've seen a few recently, them getting Karn down does stop you activating the Haywire Might, but I feel like being able to attack down Karn in these sorts of mirror matches is so important, and Haywire Might acts as an additional threat to attack down Karn, so I think it's pretty close there. And I mean, mainly because we're running Jarsil in the way we sideboard, I think Haywire Might is the better card for sure. If you're running Joan and you weren't running Jarsil, then I definitely think Terror Sunder is an interesting option, but I definitely prefer Haywire Might. And then it obviously has applications against the artifact decks as well, so if you do come across a Retrofitter Foundry deck, or, you know, a Cabaretti Revels deck, Haywire Might is great there as well. Then we have 2 Pithing Needle, which is a card that I think is incredibly good right now against a number of the combo decks. Very good against Kethis, very good against Yawgmoth, very good against Samwise combo because you can name Cauldron Familiar to stop them comboing off, or if you're confident that Woe Stride is their only sack outlet, you can name that as well. You can also bring it in against Devotion to name Karn. You can also bring it in against Reanimator to name Priest of Felright. So Pithing Needle, very high on this right now, and I could even see an argument to potentially going up to 3 copies. I mean, we don't have a ton of ways to filter if we do draw it at multiples, but getting multiple down, naming the opponent's key card is pretty good. So I think 2 Pithing Needle is really, really good right now. And then we got 2 copies of Soul Guide Lantern for Graveyard Hate. Main reason I'm high on Soul Guide Lantern right now over Unlicensed Hearse is, first of all, it's really nice with Jarsil, right? You know, same sort of thing with the Haywire Might. Enables us to consistently have stuff to bring back with Jarsil. And being able to have Soul Guide Lantern that you can crack and then just go Jarsil, bring it back again is really nice. And additionally, you know, I think it's better to have in multiples because, you know, unlike Unlicensed Hearse, it doesn't have diminishing returns. And I also think that, particularly with the One Ring, I prefer Soul Guide Lantern against a deck like Kethis combo, for example, because if you're drawing a bunch of cards off One Ring, you're more likely to find your graveyard hate later in the game. And once the opponent already has a full graveyard, Unlicensed Hearse is just too slow, particularly against decks like Kethis. And I know a deck like Phoenix isn't very popular right now, but specifically against Kethis, I think Lantern is better as the game goes on as a top deck, if that makes sense. And then finally, we've got a single copy of Stone of Irak. So this is here for mainly the sacrifice-based combo decks, so Yawgmoth. Specifically very good against the Collected Company Samwise combo decks. One of the main reasons I've gone for the Stone of Erech here is because in those matches against the Cauldron Familiar decks, you know, you can obviously shut off their combo with Pithing Needle naming Cauldron Familiar, but they also have Priest of Forgotten Gods alongside a bunch of Blood Artist effects. You know, I know Ash Lizzle's builds was running a lot of Blood Artist effects, and so Stone of Uruk just completely shuts off their ability to deal a lot of damage to you, whilst also still being very good against the Yawgmoth decks as well. And you can also just bring it in as Graveyard Hate if you really want a high density, so I typically bring this in against Reanimator as well. Now, having to hold open 2 mana to activate this is a lot worse than Soul Guide Lantern, but since we have it here for the sacrifice decks, in matchups where we want the additional Graveyard Hate, I think it's pretty reasonable to bring in as well. So that's the deck overall. Like I said, I've been really happy with it. I think this deck is very, very consistent because of the Abundant Harvest. I think Jarstall having an immediate impact on the game is generally much better than Fable of the Mirror Breaker in my opinion. I think having Haywire Might is super important at breaking these One Ring Mirror matches. I think I'm something like 14-3 against Rakdos with this deck, and it's felt super consistent. Will has been an absolute all-star as well. So in general, I'm super high on this particular build, and it's been a ton of fun to play as well. Give me a shout in the comments if you've got any questions about the deck at all. Next time I've got some gameplay with this deck so you guys can see it in action. Just got 5 matches that I was playing on the ladder, so I hope you enjoyed the gameplay, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Big up! Okay, so we're on the play here, and yeah, this hand looks great. We've got 4 lands for the Shielded already. Harvest guarantees finding us a non-land, which is really sweet, and we got Fatal Pushes early interaction, so definitely happy to keep this one. And I think I'm happy to lead on the Harvest here. There is an argument to maybe holding open Fatal Push, but in the dark, you know, I'd much rather just go Harvest now. Could potentially find a good 2 mana play, and then if the opponent does play Llanowar Elves or something, we can still Fatal Push it. So here I think I'm going to play the Blood Crypt untapped here, just in case we want to use the Fatal Push, because Jarstall is a sick hit here. We definitely want to be jamming Jarstall on turn 3. Now the opponent could very well have a Heartless Act or go for the Throat here, but we're forcing them to have a, you know, unconditional 2 mana removal spell, which not many of the mid-range decks are running at high numbers. And we do get the Harvest off here, which is great. Definitely going to pick non-land. And we found a ring. So Harvest put in absolute work here. Not only found the Jarstall, but the Jarstall flashing it back has now found the ring as well. So I feel pretty good about this spot. Now, the main thing I'm worried about here is Crucius, potentially. We don't have a good way to trigger Fatal Push. Or Thoughtseize as well. But if we can jam the One Ring next turn, you know, we've got Fatal Push in case they have a Shieldred. We'll be able to get our ring in play before the opponent if they do have theirs. They do have a Thoughtseize, which is a bit unfortunate. So presumably they take the ring. They do. So we do lose the ring, which is a bit annoying. But we do have Shieldred here. Going to attack with the Jarstall first. And I think I'm pretty interested in just jamming the Shieldred here. We can tell from the fact they didn't kill the Jarstall before that they probably don't have an unconditional removal spell unless they drew it, you know, the past couple draw steps. We could potentially go Harvest first, but I feel like that's just so mana inefficient. And getting Shieldred in play here not only starts applying pressure, but also makes opposing rings a lot worse, right? If they're planning on jamming the ring here, that's not a great option. Now we have a Shieldred. Okay, they have a Shieldred of their own. Interesting. So I think I'm going to lead on Harvest here just to see what we hit. Oh, we found the Crucius. Okay, that's perfect. So now we have a way to trigger Fatal Push. I was potentially thinking about trying to trade the Shieldreds, but now we have Fatal Push and a way to trigger Revolt. I'm definitely just going to not attack here. Going to loot away the Overgrown Tomb because Takenuma, especially with 3 legendary creatures in play, could have a lot of applications later. And then, you know, we could wait on the push, but I think I'm just going to do it now to limit the amount of life gain the opponent has. You know, they're already down to 13, going to be getting down to 11 off the next draw step, and we have a lot of pressure in play. So I feel pretty good about this spot now. Even if the opponent has 1 ring, they're in trouble. Okay, they do have another Shieldred, which is a little bit annoying. And we do draw a land here. So we still have Takenuma for 1 mana, which is pretty nice. I think I'm tempted to just attack with everything here. I mean, they could just block. Actually, no, that's probably too risky because they can probably afford to take a hit from Crucius or Jarstall. So I think I'm just going to attack with the Shieldred. They choose not to take the trade, which is interesting. And then I think I'm just going to Thoughtseize here, see what else they've got going on. Wow, it's a pretty stacked hand. Definitely just going to take the ring here. Even with, you know, Shieldred in play, we don't have a good way game 1 to deal with a resolved ring. So definitely going to take that before it becomes a problem. And they do have Fatal Push and Bowmasters, but in order for them to trigger Revolt on Fatal Push, they'd have to Bowmasters and kill their own Bowmasters here. Wow, they just jammed the Pyromancer. I mean, I guess with their own Shieldred in play, they're not taking that much damage. I'm going to activate Takenuma now, just in case we hit a Bowmasters, though. There is potentially an argument to waiting here, but if we hit a Bowmasters, we can really punish the Seasoned Pyromancer here. Wow, complete whiff. Okay, that kind of sucks. But I still feel like we're in a pretty good spot here, right? They don't have a way to trigger Revolt unless they just attack. And, you know, we have both Jarstall and Crucius here. If we can find a go for the throat, we can kill 2 of their creatures off the Jarstall. And we have an active Crucius, so I still feel like we're in a really good spot here. So if I'm just considering attacking with their Shieldred, fair. I mean, that's a brave attack. If we can find removal spells here, we basically just win. Although I guess they have Fatal Push, right? So if we do find a removal spell, they can kill one of ours. We do find a Fatal Push. Interesting. So, we've got a few options here. We could Jarsoul, but, you know, Legendary Jarsoul, go for another 1-drop here, which would be a Thoughtseize or a Fatal Push or a Harvest. But I feel like, you know, the opponent's down at 7. We should probably just be applying pressure here, right? We could, as I said, we could push the Pyromancer or the token and then, you know, have them have fewer blockers. But I think I'm better off just attacking here and then, you know, presumably they chump block. Well, they have to survive. Then they can Fatal Push the Shieldred and then we can just Fatal Push theirs. And then I still feel in a great spot. We're forcing them to block here. We basically trade off Shieldreds with these Fatal Pushes, and then we still get another Crucius trigger here. And we can discard Jarsoul, naming Ambitious, which could potentially find us either a Ring or a Shieldred. And with their Shieldred God, the Ring is great. And with them at such a low life total, the Ring is... an extra Shieldred is great as well. So, just going to pass to the end step here. Presumably they fire off Fatal Push, killing our Shieldred. So once that's dead, we can just use our own Fatal Push. And we don't have to use a treasure here as well, which is nice. So we trade off Shieldreds here. Opponent is still down at 4, so, you know, discard Jarsoul, name Ambitious, as long as they don't have another Thoughtseize here. And we hit a Shieldred. Okay, perfect. So now the opponent's going to be under a lot of pressure here. We're still pretty healthy at 10 life, so we don't have to worry about that Hive of the Eye Tyrant, really. And so it's just going to come down to what that last card is in the opponent's hand here, right? Okay, they just ship it back. Wow, he drew a ring as well. I mean, that's why I'm really high on running all 4 copies, because just drawing rings in situations like this is so good. So it looks like they're thinking about firing off the Hive, which I'm completely happy with, right? If they do that, then we should just win in upkeep, unless they have like a Heartless Axe or a Go for the Throat here. Okay, so they tap for black mana, but... I mean, presumably they could have used Fatal Push there, right? If they'd set a stop... or gone into full control mode, but either way they need like a Heartless Axe or Go for the Throat here, or they just die to the draw step. So even if they had Fatal Push the Jarsoul, we still would have won off the Shieldred and the draw step here. Okay, sweet, we got there, nice. So, sideboarding in these matchups, I've faced this matchup a ton of times, so I know exactly what I'm doing. Bringing the 3 Haywire Might, cut 2 Harvest and 1 Thoughtseize. And the reason for that is Haywire Might is really good at killing opposing rings. You know, Ring is the defining card in these mirror matches, right? Whoever gets their Ring online first typically is in a really big advantage. So, and obviously, you know, without counter spells, the only other way you have of stopping the Ring is with discard spells like Thoughtseize. But these mid-range mirror matches often come down to top decks, so having a way to deal with rings once they resolve is super important. And Haywire Might can do that at instant speed, gains you some life back. You can bring it back with Jarsoul, which is pretty relevant a lot of the time as well. So, and then in terms of cuts, you know, Harvest, I'm normally happy to go down to 2 to enable sideboarding. And then Thoughtseize is good. You know, I think it's generally better in these mirror matches than it has been for a while because of the impact of cards like Shielded and One Ring. But again, these mid-range mirror matches can come down to top decking an awful lot of the time. So Thoughtseize isn't that great there because, you know, the opponent can just, you know, if the opponent's empty-handed, it's bad. If the opponent's got a Ring online, it's pretty bad. So I didn't attack there in case the opponent had Bowmasters. I don't want to throw away the Haywire Might here. And we don't have a way to kill Crucius, which is pretty bad. I mean, we can potentially trigger trigger Revolt here by letting them activate the Crucius, using the Haywire Might to kill their treasure token, and then Fatal Pushing the Crucius, which, you know, is a 2-for-1, but with Jarsoul, we can immediately bring back the Haywire Might as well, and we also deny them the treasure as well. So even though we 2-for-1 ourselves, we can immediately Jarsoul to get that card advantage back, and we get the Crucius off the board as well, which is really important. So we get the Haywire Might back here, and now we have One Ring available for next turn as well. So as long as the opponent doesn't have a Shieldred here... Oh, they have a One Ring of their own, interesting. So we have the answer in play. So the risk of jamming our own One Ring here is that we don't have mana open for Haywire Might. So if the opponent has a removal spell, we're in trouble. So I'm not going to risk it. I'm going to wait a turn to go for the One Ring here. And then I think I'm just going to play the fast land tapped, get in with Jarsoul, and then we have Bowmasters here. So if the opponent has an... Oh, I keep forgetting about the protection. So that attack was just pointless. It doesn't really make a difference though. They do have a Thoughtseize, which is kind of rough. I mean... Just in case they have an answer for the One Ring or a second Thoughtseize, I'm going to flash in the Bowmasters here. You know, just so the opponent doesn't have a choice. You know, typically, if we knew they only had one Thoughtseize, then it's best to wait there, because if they take the Bowmasters, we're happy to keep the ring, but just in case they have a second Thoughtseize, I think it's best to flash in response. And they do have a Crucius. Wow, they pitch a ring. Okay, so they must have another ring. Oh, wow, we drew a ring off the top. Gas. I mean, again, this is just why I think running 4 copies is so important, because increasing your chances of drawing a top deck like that is just so big in these mirror matches, or just in general, right? Ring is just good in all matchups, basically. And I think I'm happy to take the trade here, right? So I might as well attack. Don't need to play defense while we have protection from the ring. And if they take the trade here, I'm very happy with that. Okay, interesting they do. So that might mean they've got another Crucius in hand, because I feel like the value of Jarsil when we don't have a 2-drop in the graveyard isn't as high as their Crucius. So they do have a Shieldred here. Obviously, we'd like to find an answer. Oh, wow. Okay, Fatal Push is nice. So we could potentially go Crucius, wait until our end step to activate the ring here, but I think it's such a high life total, we can afford to just take 4 off the Shieldred here, get slightly better information before we decide what to do with our turn. And that's a really good draw. So I think casting Shieldred after you've activated the one ring isn't as valuable, really. So I'm just going to go for Crucius here. Probably pitch the Sokenzan, and then we can potentially push. I think I'm just going to go for the push now, and then we can still hold open, go for the throat during the opponent's turn. Going to go for the push now just because life total is a valuable resource in these one ring mirror matches, so I'd rather do it now and deny them the 2 life they'd gain off the draw step. And if they attack, we'd probably have to push anyway, so they do have another ring, kind of predictable, because, you know, we saw them discard one earlier, so... And they have a Shieldred as well, so that was a pretty good top deck, whichever one they had. But we do have go for the throat here, so if they do choose to activate now, we'll definitely just go for the throat in response. I mean, so opponent's playing cleverly here. They're waiting for us to, well, waiting to see if we have an answer. Even though we could wait until they activate on our turn, I think, you know, we don't want to get choked on mana here, to be honest, right? So I'm going to fire off the go for the throat now. Basically means that they get 2 extra life, but going into next turn with the ring here, I'd much rather have more mana available. So now we can jam our own Shieldred, draw off the ring, and now I feel like we're in a really, really solid position here, because we have both Bowmasters and Shieldred in play, which is really good against their ring. And going to play this in Shocked, and then we have the option of going for another Bowmasters, or potentially a go for the throat as well. And then, just debating whether to discard a Crucius or a Harvest here. I think I'm just going to go for Harvest, because if they kill our Crucius, having a backup one's pretty nice. And we find another Shieldred, so I feel like we're in such a good position right now. I'd be very surprised if we ended up... if the opponent managed to get back into this one anyway. So if they draw, we probably might as well flash in the Bowmasters now. Okay, they do have a Bowmasters of their own, right? So they can kill one of our Bowmasters, but we still get to kill their Bowmasters off ours and still get the triggers here. So they draw 2, we get 2 Shieldred triggers, 2 Bowmasters triggers. Is a little risky going after the Bowmasters. I was going to say, in case they draw exactly their own Bowmasters here. But, I mean, I still think we're in a really good position. So, I think... just going to lead on Thoughtseize here, see what they've got in hand. Wow, Chandra and one ring. So we take the Chandra. Okay, opponent just keeps it up. I mean, makes sense. We're so far ahead at that point. Okay, so we're on the play here, and this hand is sick. This hand looks great. Right, on the play, we got Thoughtseize on turn 1, we got Harvest and Thoughtseize on turn 2. Harvest can guarantee the 3rd land for the Jarsil as well, and then we can go Jarsil, flash back another Thoughtseize, or potentially just use Harvest if the opponent's empty-handed. So opponent mulling to 5 is obviously rough when we have Thoughtseize. Wow, but they are on Devotion, and they do have a fairly Thoughtseize-proof hand here. So I'm going to take the Elvish Mystic here, even though we can't kill the Halfling with Bowmasters, because it shuts off their top decks, because Halfling can't tap for green mana for something like Old Growth Troll. So it makes their top deck slightly worse going for the Mystic. There is my logic, basically. But I mean, even though the opponent did mull to 5, the way Devotion beats us is typically with top decks. And they have, you know, they already have access to 4 mana with their hand. I'm going to Thoughtseize now anyway, just in case they did draw land. Okay, they did find an Old Growth Troll, so very happy that we went for the Thoughtseize there. See what they top deck. Okay, they found a Cura, which isn't bad. And now all of their top decks outside Storm the Festival Alive, which is a little scary. So I'm going to go for Jarsil here. Obviously, Thoughtseize is dead, so just going to go for Harvest. And I'm going to go for land here, just so we have that 4th land for the Shieldred. You know, opponent is top decking, so we just need to start closing the game out. Give them fewer looks at stuff like Cavalier of Thorns. Okay, they do have a Llanowar Elves, which would mean if we left that unchecked, they could potentially, you know, top deck into Storm the Festival next turn because of the Kiora untap. So I'm going to lead on attacking here just to see if they block. I very much doubt they will. I'm going to go after the Kiora here just because at 20 I don't think we're really racing and Kiora can potentially be an issue. And I'm not going to jam the Shielded anymore. I want to go for Bowmasters killing the Llanowar Elves just so Storm the Festival is no longer a live top deck. And then I'm just going to go for Bowmasters killing the Llanowar Elves here. And now Cavalier of Thorns and most of the other cards in their deck are still reasonable top decks, but I just didn't want, you know, I'd feel really bad if I jam Shielded and they just draw Storm the Festival here. You know, I don't feel it's worth the risk. Okay, opponent just keeps it up, so modding to 5 against Thoughtseize is rough, but this matchup is scary from our side because top decking is really good. Now I'm going to bring in Cut Downs and Pithing Needle's pretty good here. Definitely going to trim down to 2 Abundant Harvest, and I don't think Bowmasters is actually very good in this matchup, especially going second. Even going first, I'm not sure it's better than stuff like Cut Down because, you know, 4 of their Mana Dorks and Delighted Halfling can't be killed by it. And typically I would prefer Cut Down or Fatal Push anyway, right? You kind of want to kill their Dork on turn 1 and then hold up, do something else on turn 2. So even though Bowmasters is very good specifically against Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic, I don't think it's that great against the rest of the deck unless they're running a lot of 1 rings in the main. If we see their build is running like 3 ring in the main, 1 in the side for Karn, then I can definitely consider keeping the Bowmasters in, but we have a lot of good cards in the sideboard. I think discard spells can be very good. I think Pithing Needle is very good against Karn and potentially Kiora, and obviously Cut Down is really good in spots like this to be able to slow them down. Okay, nothing on turn 2 is great to see, so they're just going to ship it back here. Got to go for the throat if they do play something like a Pelucranos here. Okay, they do go for Kiora. Fatal Push is a great draw here though, because we can go Crucius here, discard a land name Ambitious, and then we've got Revolt Fatal Push up for next turn. So if they do go for something like a Pelucranos, or I mean, Old Growth Troll is slightly worse against because they can obviously put it on a land, they get to keep the devotion and everything like that. Okay, Wolfwillow Haven, so they still have access to 5 mana. They could very well have Cavalier of Thorns here, which would be pretty scary. Oh well, Vorinclex, interesting. So that does mean that, you know, they draw off the Kiora and they get 2 forests here, so they're going to keep curving out, which is kind of scary. Just got to hope they don't have too much top end here, I think. I mean, thankfully we have Go for the Throat, and they don't get a death trigger like they do off the Cavalier, which is really nice. So Jarsil not really doing too much here, unfortunately, because the, you know, the Cut Down in the graveyard can't be cast off it. Definitely think we need to go for the Throat the Vorinclex before they activate it. Then I'm going to attack down Kiora to 3 here. Again, I think going after Kiora makes more sense than anything else. And then I am going to jam the Jarsil because I would really like to get it up to being able to cast Go for the Throat if possible. You know, even if the opponent doesn't cast a... Well, if they cast a Mana Dork, we can obviously just kill it with the Jarsil, but we can just use Fatal Push to kill... or to target, like, a Crucius. If we don't have Revolt, it just doesn't kill it. I just want to tick up the Jarsil to, you know, 2 intensity so that we can then use... Go for the Throat. So they do have an Old Growth Troll, which obviously, like I mentioned, isn't great to kill because of the death trigger. And they have Nykthos as well, which is pretty scary. So, I mean, thankfully they only have 5 mana, so they can't Storm the Festival, but... Wow, they can go up to 8 mana, so now they can. Wow, they do have Storm the Festival. So I'm going to crack the treasure now just in case they hit Karn off Storm the Festival, because I probably am, well, potentially am interested in using the Fatal Push this turn. And if you wait until Storm the Festival resolves and they do put a Karn into play, you obviously can't use the treasures anymore. Okay, so they do have 1 ring in the main deck, so I might be interested in bringing the Bowmasters back in post-sideboard, particularly on the play if we do lose this one. I mean, thankfully we already have the Shieldred here, which is obviously great. They still have 5 mana available. Okay, they do have Karn as well. And they do mine. Let's see what they grab here. I mean, they do have a lot of mana, which is very scary, right? They could potentially grab a Cityscape Lever or Portal at this point. Wow, they go for Coating. I mean, that's pretty greedy. That's, you know, relying on Old Grey Troll surviving here. And we do have the Fatal Push, so... Have to use it now, obviously. And because we've lost the treasure, we don't really have a good way to trigger Revolt for Jarsil using Fatal Push next turn. So, but yeah, now that Coating is looking a lot more of a risky pick for the opponent because we can now kill both their planeswalkers, which is pretty sick. I'm just going to jam Shieldred here, and then... Not sure if it's worth just... we could use Fate... Actually, I don't know, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I'm supposed to use Fatal Push so that we can then use the... Actually, yeah, I think I am. I was thinking maybe in case they play a Mana Dork, it's best to wait on the Jarsoul activation there, but I probably should have just used Jarsoul, targeting Crucius. Like, the Crucius doesn't die because we haven't triggered Revolt, and then Jarsoul will be at 2 intensity to be able to use Go for the Throat next turn. So here, I think I'm going to play the land and discard Crucius, naming Ambitious, just in case we hit a will. Right, I want to have the 5th land in play just in case they go Karn, and we then can't use treasures to use will. But yeah, opponent's obviously under a lot of pressure here with the Shieldred, and Mono Green doesn't really have good ways to deal with Shieldred, right? They kind of need Karn, unless they're running the Huntmaster build. They'd need to go Karn, grab Transmogrifying Wand, or potentially Mightstone and Weakstone if they're running that. I mean, they obviously can put a bunch of creatures in play to block, but we're making that One Ring a lot less appealing. They do have Cura now, though, so that's a lot of mana. So they could potentially just go off with Storm the Festivals here, which would be kind of rough. And yeah, I definitely think last turn I should have just used Fatal Push off Jarsoul because, you know, the upside of being able to kill a Mana Dork as opposed to a bigger creature is, yeah, like a Cavalier of Thorns is a pretty big difference. So I think that definitely was a mistake on my part. I should have just used the Fatal Push there. Yikes. And they found another Nykthos. So now they can presumably activate Storm the Festival from the graveyard. I mean, we are going to start dealing them damage off the Shieldred here. They do need to be wary of their life total because of Shieldred. But, you know, if they go like Storm the Festival into Karn Kiora and then untap the Nykthos again, they could very easily just grab, you know, something to kill the Shieldred. And then I think we're basically just lost at that point. But, you know, Shieldred is definitely keeping us in this game here. Wow, they activate the One Ring. I think that has to be a good sign, right? If they're choosing to dig here. So they go down to 11. Okay, there is an Elvish Mystic, so we do have a use for the Fatal Push in the graveyard. But again, I think we'd much prefer to be able to use Go for the Throat this turn, I think. Okay, another Cavalier of Thorns. So gotta hope they don't hit a Nykthos here. That will deal them another 2 off the Shieldred, though. Okay, complete whiff off the Cavalier. That's obviously great news for us. And they go down to 9 off the Shieldred, so... And then they're obviously taking 2 off the One Ring as well, so... Ah, they have a Storm the Festival in hand, okay. Wow, and they hit a Karn, so... I mean, this isn't looking good here, right? Grab Portal. Okay, go for the Throat. So we can go for the Throat one of the Cavaliers. Jarsoul... if we had Jarsoul at 2 intensity here, I think we could just go for lethal, right? We can kill 2 Cavaliers, just go face with Shieldred, Crucius, and Jarsoul. I mean, we can go for the Throat the Cavalier, but we can't use the treasure to cast this Shieldred here, right? So if we kill the Cavalier and went face with everything here, they can block the Shieldred, and then they take 3. And then they're taking 2 off the One Ring, 2 off the Shieldred. But because we don't have this treasure available, I don't think that works, right? So what we'd have to do here is go after Karn, I think. So we can Jarsoul cut down the Elvish Mystic. But yeah, if we attack face here, they block the Shieldred, and then the opponent goes down to 2, and we can't recast the second Shieldred, so... this is an annoying spot here. If we had one more land, we could just go face with everything, but I think we have to go after Karn here. And then presumably they block the Shieldred with 1, and they would block either Crucius or Jarsoul with the other. And then we can play the second Shieldred, and then that means they don't have another Karn going into next turn. And it also cuts them off a ton of devotion, right? They'd lose 3 pips here. I mean, they potentially could still cast Portal, but they might then just die to their own One Ring trigger the following turn. Yeah, so they block the Shieldred, which makes a lot of sense. Choose a Cavalier to die. So I guess they want to get back a card from the graveyard, and then... So yeah, if this treasure was a land instead, we could have gone face. Thinking about it, actually, if we had Jarsoul on 2 intensity... I don't think we would have been able to go for lethal this turn because we'd have gone go for the throat instead of a fatal push, but we would have had another creature survive, which I guess maybe doesn't make a big difference when they have Portal to Phyrexia. But basically my game plan here is jam Shieldred, they go down to... Well, they take 2 off the One Ring, 2 off the Shieldred, down to 3. And then they basically need to find a way either to get rid of their One Ring or gain some life, or they die to the One Ring next turn. So my slim chance of winning this game is if they don't have a way to do either of those. Now, having said that, they have a lot of looks here, right? They have, well, presumably they have to play Portal to Phyrexia, which does take up 9 of their mana here. So that's a start. But if they can Portal to Phyrexia and either gain life or get rid of the One Ring, I think we basically just lose this one. But it was very close. You know, Shieldred definitely kept us in this game, even though we fell pretty far behind early on. So they do have a lot of mana here, right? They've got 14 mana, so that is a lot of mana to Portal plus something else. So I assume, unless they get very unlucky or they punt here, we should probably be in with a good shout. So they get rid of the Shieldred and the Jarsaw. So now it just comes down to whether they can... Wow, they activate the One Ring. I mean, actually they were at 3, so they would have had another turn if they just not activated the One Ring. So the fact they activate the One Ring makes me pretty certain that they have a way to play through it. So probably not going to be winning this one, I don't think. I mean, to be honest, they have a way of doing that on board, right? They can just activate Polukranos and attack us. That does it. So I think at this point, you know, we've probably lost, but I'll make them play it out. There's a chance, you know, it's very easy with Mono Green Devotion to get lost in the source and just be doing a lot of different stuff and forget about the ring, potentially. But I mean, the fact they activated it and now they're exactly dead on board to their own ring makes me almost 100% certain they have a way to bypass it. Yeah, so they got another con here. See what they grab. Probably another One Ring. Okay, so they got Haywire Might. They exile their own One Ring, gain 3 life, presumably. Yeah, okay, so we're not winning that one. But we were pretty close, right? If, like I said, if that treasure had been another land, we could have just gone face and put them dead to their own One Ring. So... I mean, we did see One Ring main deck, but again, I don't know. I'm debating whether to bring Bowmasters back in or not. Honestly, I don't think it's that great. It only hits Elvish Mystic Llanowar Elves, which I don't even know if they're running the full 8 copies, because presumably they're running 4 Halfling before anything else, because it doesn't die to Bowmasters. And then it's just not that great against the rest of their deck outside Ring, and I feel like the way to win this matchup isn't having a Bowmasters in play when they have 1 ring. I feel like the way to win this matchup is to just disrupt their early game, you know, cut them off their early mana, use discard spells to get rid of their threats, and then just apply pressure. And Bowmasters is kind of inefficient at doing that, right? It's only really good against exactly elves when you're on the play on turn 2, but even then I think I'd just rather use Fatal Push, so... Yeah, I don't know, it's pretty close. Okay, this hand looks pretty good though, I think. Obviously we need lands. If we don't find the 3rd land, we're in trouble here, but... We have Duress to hopefully get rid of a threat, and then we have Go for the Throat to deal with their turn 1 elf, which is very important when they have Leyline. Okay, interesting. So Wolfenhaven or Cura. I think with an Old Growth Troll in hand, Cura is probably the more pressing threat. So going to take that, and then presumably they play Dork on turn 1, which we're just going to use Go for the Throat on. Okay, so we're in a position now where we really need a 3rd land. Abundant Harvest doesn't get it done here because we obviously don't have any green mana, so really want to find that 3rd land. I mean, in a 24 land deck you are fairly likely to, but... And if you do have green mana... Okay, perfect, we did. If you do have green mana, Harvest also helps us get there as well. But luckily we did, and I think I'm going to pitch Crucius here, naming Ambitious. The ring is kind of risky in this matchup because of Karn, right? So we do find a 1 ring, but I think in the vast majority of cases against Devotion, you want to get shielded in play before the ring, so that if they tap out for Karn, you have a way to attack it down, which is very important. Okay, so they go for Old Growth Troll Llanowar Elves. They do have a lot of mana going into next turn. Just got to hope they don't draw too many top-end stuff. And I think, you know, because of Karn, I'm actually going to pitch the 1 ring and name Ambitious here. If they do have Karn, we might not be able to cast the Will here, but if we can, you know, if they don't have Karn this turn, we can use Will to steal their Old Growth Troll, which does cut them off a lot of Devotion. Okay, they have a Cavalier, and they found a Nykthos, so that's obviously pretty good for them. Okay, thankfully they don't have any more top-end. They can... Oh no, they can't activate Leyline here because of... they don't have 2 mana to activate the Nykthos, but we can use Will to steal the Old Growth Troll here. And we actually have a Forest in hand as well, so we could potentially sack it next turn and get it on one of our lands. But I think it's best to just hold on to the Pithing Needle here. Because we could name Leyline of Abundance, but I think naming Karn when we have a Shieldred in play is going to be really good, right? We saw last game that Shieldred is really difficult for them to deal with without access to their Karn sideboard. And I'm going to Fatal Push here just to deny them some more mana, particularly with Leyline of Abundance in play. Now, they still have a lot of mana this turn, but if they happen to draw Storm the Festival, it is going to potentially cut them off a lot of different lines. Okay, they just ship it back, so I have to imagine that's a brick. So, definitely want to specialise the Will and play Pithing Needle this turn. Just trying to think the order we want to do stuff in. I mean, we can potentially attack with the Old Growth Troll, right? Although, I don't know if we get really much benefit from doing that. I don't know, I might as well, right? If they block, then we don't have to specialise the Will, we can save it. If they don't, then we just get in for 4 extra damage. So definitely specialise here, and I don't think there's any point going for the red one, because we're not going to attack anyway. So I think we just go for the black one. And at 12 with a Shieldred in play, I think there's a pretty reasonable chance they might just let us draw 3 here, because otherwise they go down to 7, then they're down to 5 off the Shieldred trigger, so... So we do get specialised. Obviously, Mono Green doesn't have any instant speed interaction, really. So don't get the Old Growth Troll death trigger because we don't have a Forest in play. But, wow, they take the 5. So that makes our clock a lot faster. And then I still think Pithing Needle is important here. I was just debating whether we want to discard it to Crucius. But getting Needle in play, naming Karn is going to be pretty big. Oh, wow, it's lagging. It always lags with Pithing Needle for some reason. So they activate Leyline in response just in case we... name Leyline, but definitely just going to name Karn. And now, unless they have like main deck Voracious Hydra, I very much doubt they're going to have a good way to deal with Shieldred. And now they're just on like a 3-turn clock with Shieldred without even needing to attack here. So I feel pretty good about this spot, right? Yeah, they just keep it up. Sweet, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And we're up against Zerda, so that's either going to be Control or Kethis. And this hand is pretty sick against Control. Double Blade Masters is very good, and obviously Shieldred's sick as well. This is going to be a risky keeper against Kethis, but the opponent's already on a Multi 6, and we do have a lot of pressure, so as long as we can draw some interaction, I still think we've got game against Kethis with this hand. I mean, ideally I'd prefer to face Control. I think it's a better matchup overall. And this hand is a lot better against Control as well. But we'll see. Hopefully within the first land what they're on. Overgrown Tomb, and they have a stop. So they almost certainly have a Mox Amber in hand. And we are definitely against Kethis. I mean, thankfully we have a Fatal Push. So we do have some amount of interaction now, which is important. Although they do have Emery. So we don't... Fatal Push obviously can't kill Emery without Revolt. Hopefully they don't mill over an artifact. They do. They've got the Chromatic Star. So... Another Shieldred, not the best draw here, so we could be in trouble, right? We're on the draw, we only have one piece of interaction which can't currently kill any of their creatures, but we can start applying pressure, especially if they have like a Rona here or some other draw effects. We can potentially use Bowmasters to kill something. And we can obviously use the trick of using Bowmasters to trigger Revolt, so if they do go for Kethis next turn or something, we can go flash in Bowmasters to kill itself. Wow, they have the One Ring. Okay, I think that's actually really good for us with this hand. And they activate it. Okay, so now we can use Bowmasters to kill Emery. So that's really good for us. So now Bowmasters are turned into a removal spell. And we have, we have double Bowmasters Shieldred, which is really going to punish them having the ring there. And then we can go untap lands into potentially Bowmasters trigger Revolt Fatal Push if we need. So obviously not going to attack while the opponent has protection from the ring, but now activating the ring is going to be very risky for them. And if they do activate it before playing anything, I think we still flash in the Bowmasters and don't use it to trigger Revolt. Because now we're applying a lot of pressure to their life total. I mean, obviously, without a way to kill a 3-drop, they could still potentially go off, but they don't really have that much of a stacked graveyard right now, so they still need some setup to go off. They might need something like a Jace to fill the graveyard, and we can fairly easily attack it down, right? We've got a 7/7 in play already, so them having the One Ring opens up this hand to be really, really sick, obviously. Double Bowmaster's Shieldred is obviously gas against the ring. And they do play Killen, so now we have a good target for the Fatal Push. Okay, they go for Relic. I think we need to kill the Kinnan now, otherwise that doubles up the mana they can get off the Relic. So now we kill the Kinnan, and that might stop them playing a 3-drop they wanted to. Okay, interesting. So definitely going to attack with everything, and then we can either go for Shielded or Crucius here. I think I'm just going to jam Shielded. The argument for Crucius is we could potentially find a Fatal Push to kill something here, but I don't think they have enough in the graveyard to go off here. They go down to 1, which means they're dead to the ring next turn. So they need to find a way to win this turn, which, you know, Relic of Legends could do it, but they would need, like, Kethis into Jace into a good mill to win here, I think. So I think, I don't know, maybe it's better to go for Crucius because it doesn't change our clock in any way, right? We can still put them on a clock. Okay, they just go for attack anyway. We should be winning this. But yeah, maybe going for Crucius is better because they go down to 3, which would mean that they'd be dead to Shieldred next turn anyway. So maybe it's better to go for Crucius there because it doesn't change our clock. And we could have potentially found a Fatal Push, but I think we should be good here either way, right? They've only got 1 mana spare. They would need to go like... And they can't even use Amber to cast Kethis, even if they had 2 more Mox Ambers in hand, so... I think we should be winning this one. But yeah, I think I made a slight misplay. I probably should have played Crucius last turn and then saved one of the Shieldeds for the turn after. Okay, we managed to get there, which is pretty sick. So against Kethis, definitely want Soulguide Lanterns and Pithing Needles for sure. And then could potentially see bringing the Stone in as well. It is significantly worse than Soulguide Lantern, but maybe additional Graveyard Hate is useful. I want to see... So we can trim a couple of Harvest as usual. Actually, thinking about it, even though Bowmasters was good that game, I'm not 100% sure how great it is when they don't have the ring. Like, it did basically win us that game last game, but that was just because they went for a really quick ring. Trying to think whether the first Haywire Might is better than the 4th Harvest. I mean, Haywire Might is only good against exactly the ring, and I guess it's also good against Relic of Legends, but... not 100% sure. I mean, typically, I'm not very high on Bowmasters against Kethis, but it looks like the opponent's probably running quite a few copies in the main, unless they just happen to draw like a 1 or 2 of. Just trying to think whether Stone is better than Haywire Might. Just trying to think whether Haywire Might is better than the 4th Harvest. Actually, I think I'm going to bring in... Stone is really slow in this matchup, but having Graveyard Hate that can wipe the whole graveyard is pretty nice, and we can leap it with Jarsoul, so... Going to run it back like that. We don't have any ways to deal with a resolved ring, but we have... Actually, yeah, maybe Haywire Might is better when we cut the Bowmasters, specifically against ring, but... Not 100% sure. Okay, this hand looks pretty good, right? We need the 3rd land, obviously, but we got Thoughtseize, we got Pithing Needle and Stone, and Jarsoul, which can obviously bring them back as well, so... Thinking about it, I'm not 100% sure if Stone is good in this matchup or not. It is very slow. Having to hold open 2 mana just to exile the graveyard isn't great. So apparently he's on Thoughtseize here. Interesting to see what they take. I mean, the double Jarsoul does mean we're slightly better against Thoughtseize here, but they might still end up taking one of them. Because whatever 1-drop they take, we can just get it back with the Jarsoul anyway, right? I mean, taking Thoughtseize does mean that we don't interact with their hand until turn 3, so that makes sense, yeah. And they ship it back. So I think... I just want to get Pithing Needle into play here, just in case they have another Thoughtseize. I think Needle is much better than Stone in this matchup, so definitely just going to name the Kethis here. And now they need to find a way to answer the Pithing Needle before they go off. And we do have the 3rd land now for Jarsoul. Okay, go for the throat. It's a pretty nice draw here. So now we have a way to interact on turn 2. That means that we could potentially go Jarsoul, Thoughtseize into Jarsoul, flashback, go for the throat the following turn. Going to shock in the Stomping Ground here, just in case we draw another land. We might want to save the Boseiju to kill a Relic of Legends or something. But yeah, we'll see what the opponent does here. Wow, they just put Zerda into hand. I guess they might figure that we're holding open removal, considering we shocked in the Stomping Ground, but that could be a Bowmasters. Okay, we did draw another land, so I'm just going to go for Jarsoul into Thoughtseize here. See what they got going on. So very happy to see the slow start from the opponent. Wow, Borborygmus. Okay, so they're probably playing the list that the person who made the last qualifier was running. They had Borborygmus, can't even say it. Borborygmus, that's the one. In their sideboard for grindier matchups like this. And then, to be fair, that is kind of a scary card. Although it drawing cards probably means it's worse in, you know, a Bowmaster's Shieldred meta than it was beforehand, but very happy to take that with a Thoughtseize, because that could have been a card that we would have struggled to deal with had we not had a Go for the Throat. Okay, interesting. So we've got some options here. We could just go for the Throat the Zerda here, and then we have access to go for the Throat flashback off the Jarsaw, which I don't mind. They can activate the Plaza of Heroes, but I'm pretty happy for them to just burn a land on it. If they do, they have another Plaza of Heroes in hand. But we're basically just, you know, stone raining them by doing this, so I'm pretty happy with it. And then we can get stone into play and then go for harvest. Actually, thinking about it, that was a misplay on my part. I should have played the stone first, right? Because if the Go for the Throat had resolved, we would have then exiled the Zerda. So that was just a sequencing mistake on my part. I definitely should have played the stone first. So interesting to see whether they attack or not. I mean, obviously we're disincentivized not to. We really want to use the Go for the Throat here, or have access to it anyway. Okay, they just pass back. So I definitely think we'll just go for the Throat again. You know, if they go for Plaza of Heroes again, we're just getting rid of one of their lands, which I'm fine with. And to be honest, Zerda isn't the biggest threat. You know, I would obviously ideally like to save Go for the Throats for something like, I don't know, a Kethis, even though we have it on lock, or an Emery. You know, something that can get them continued value. But Crucius is a really great pickup here. Now we can start smoothing our hand out, trying to find more stuff. Okay, we find Fatal Push, great. So now we can use that to kill, you know, Emerys or potentially Ronas, you know, stuff that can get them value. So going down to 6 I think is fine. I don't think they'll have great ways to deal the last few points of damage. Okay, so they do have a Kethis, but we don't have to worry about that because we have the Pithing Needle right now anyway. I think I'm still going to push the Kethis though, just in case they find, you know, if they do find an answer for the Pithing Needle, they then need to find another Kethis. And with the stone, we get to exile it straight away. So here, I think, you know, we could just attack and apply pressure, or I could go Jarsaw, keep the new version, which triggers Revolt, and then just Fatal Push the... Or Thoughtseize here, potentially. I think Fatal Push is better, though. Get the Zerda off the battlefield, cut them off Moxamba mana, and now we have Go for the Throat available off Jarsaw for the next creature they play. And then obviously we have Crucius smoothing our draws out. And, like, you know, if we don't kill the Zerda there, we do risk just being on a 2-turn clock. So I think this is definitely the safe play. And another Go for the Throat is just great insurance here. So opponent just ships it back. Okay, Shieldred's a sick draw. So obviously we don't have any target for Go for the Throat, but that's fine. Just going to decline on the Jarsaw and then, you know, get in for 6. Going to cast the Shieldred here, and then I think I'm just going to loot away the Go for the Throat just so we have 2 mana open for the stone activation. I think holding open Graveyard Hate is probably more important here. Okay, opponent just keeps... Oh, sweet. We got there. Nice. Okay, so unfortunately can't keep that one because we don't have green mana for Harvest and it's just essentially a one-lander. This is a little bit risky. I mean, I don't want to go below a 6 in a Thoughtseize meta, really. And, you know, all we need for this hand to be functional is a red land. Okay, opponent leads on Thoughtseize. Interesting that they're on white-black, though. So could potentially be Mardu. Could, you know, Mardu Midrange. Could potentially be Reanimator, maybe. Okay, they take Fatal Push, and we do draw a red land. Perfect. So I'm just going to play, you know, even though we give away information, I'm going to play it in tapped here because preserving the 2 life is much more important than bluffing something. Okay, so they are on Reanimator. Wow, and we do draw a Fatal Push, so that's perfect. So now we can go Crucius. Definitely want to keep the Fatal Push, so I think here I'm just going to pitch the Shieldred, and I'm going to go for Lesser, I think, because I want to use the Fatal Push... Oh, sorry, I might want to use this treasure for Fatal Push, and that means that I want a land to be able to go for 1 ring next turn, right? If we go for Ambitious for a will there, and we use the treasure for Fatal Push, at least Expedient gives us a look at a land to be able to cast 1 ring next turn. So opponent plays Harvester. If they loot away Reanimation target, we're obviously going to push the Priest here, stop them reanimating. The scary thing is now, though, that they can, you know, unearth the Priest, and we don't have any good way to stop that, but we do delay them for a little while, which is important. So now we can go Jarsaw. We didn't draw an untapped land for the ring, but we still have Jarsaw here, which is pretty nice, right? We can push the Harvester, get in with the Crucius, and then going to loot away the land here because they're not very likely to be running Karns, so we can just use the treasure to cast the 1 ring next turn instead. And just got to hope they don't keep drawing lands here, because if they hit the 5th land, they obviously can just go for unearthing the Priest, but You know, hitting the 5th land in what presumably is no higher than the 25 land deck isn't that likely. Okay, so they do have the 4th land, which is kind of scary. Oh, wow. Okay, that's a sick draw. So I was just going to jam the ring, but I feel like applying pressure here is really good. You know, we can go for the throat. We could potentially save that go for the throat for Atraxa here, but I just keep I want to just keep applying pressure, right? If they do use Priest of Far Rights, they have to go down to 2. So if we find a Shieldred here, which we do, we should be good to win. And a lot of their untapped lands will be shock lands as well, so they can't go shock land into Unearth Priest anymore. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. I think applying pressure there was the right play because Priest costs 3 life. So here I want all the Graveyard Hate and the Pithing Needles. Stone Erect is definitely slower than normal, but I still think it's better to have access to as much Graveyard Hate as possible. I'm not super high on Thoughtseize here compared to most other lists, or Will, although I don't know how good Bowmaster is in this matchup. So I think Thoughtseize is fine in general because you can hit obviously stuff like Crucius. I don't know. I'm debating whether Bowmasters is better than Thoughtseize here. I'm not sure. I think Will is probably better than the 4th Harvest. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. This is. I'm going to run it back like this. I'm going to try the Bowmasters because they do have a lot of looting effects, right? They presumably have Fable. They might actually they don't have Seasoned Pyromancer because we saw Gigantha, but they've got Fable. They've got Bloodtithe Harvester, which they're going to loot with. So I could potentially see an argument to running Thoughtseize instead of Bowmasters though, but Thoughtseize, you know, in a lot of ways this is kind of a mid-range mirror match. It's going to go for land on Abundant Harvest here, obviously. But Thoughtseize becomes worse as the game goes on, and it's obviously, and a lot of their stuff can be castable from the graveyard, right? Unburial Rites and Priest of Far Rights can both be cast from the graveyard, so I think Thoughtseize isn't as good in this matchup as it is in others, but I could definitely see an argument to running the Thoughtseize over the Bowmasters instead. So opponent attacks, definitely going to use the Bowmasters here. This does just give away to the opponent that we don't have a way to kill Crucius, but I think I'm going to take the opportunity to get rid of the Harvester here. And we don't want to take unnecessary damage with 2 rings in hand either. Okay, unfortunately they do have the Crucius, which then, if they have... Wow, they pitch and tracks it. If they have Fatal Push here, we're in real trouble because they can push our Crucius, but I don't think we have a better line here, really. So if they do have Fatal Push, this is going to be really rough, but I think we just have to go for it and hope they don't have it at this point. Okay, they don't have Fatal Push, which is huge. I think I'm going to pitch the Bowmasters here and name... I'm not sure whether to go for Ambitious or Expedient. I think I'm going to go for Expedient here because I quite want to go... we could potentially go Will, Steal, Crucius as a way to just kill theirs. And going the 1 ring, without having to use up... I mean, I guess we already had a land, so maybe we could have gone for Ambitious there, but I feel like a lot of our best draws here are 1 mana, right? Fatal Push is really good against Crucius. All of our Graveyard Hate is 1 mana as well, so that was another big reason why I wanted to go for Expedient, because I want to maximise my chances here of finding a Lantern or a Stone of Erect before they can reanimate something. They do have a Priest of Fell Rights. I mean, thankfully we can steal that with the Will here, right? We can steal their Priest and then stop them from reanimating next turn. But we'll see what we draw first, obviously. Okay, so they pitch Fable Name Ambitious. Oh, wow, we found the Stone. Okay. So I think it's generally safer to go for the Stone here than Will, because even if we steal the Priest of Fell Rights, they discarded Fable Naming Ambitious, so there's a decent chance that they have Unburial Rights. And if they have untapped land, they can go untapped land into Unburial Rights. So I think it's best to go for Stone here. And unfortunately, that does mean that we need to just basically just keep holding open 2 mana, so I don't think we can jam the ring here. So this is a spot that really highlights how much worse Stone is than Lantern in this particular matchup, but I still think it's best to have access to, right? We still have Graveyard Hate here, so because if we had just gone Will, Steal, Priest of Fell Rights, as I said, if they go untap lands, Unburial Rights that attract, so we're in a really bad spot there. So interesting, Banishing Light, so presumably they have that for 1 ring, but we can still activate Stone in response, get rid of the Attractor in their graveyard, and then draw a card. This is kind of rough if they then have another reanimation target, because they can still loot it away. Okay, Bowmaster is an interesting draw here. And they go after Crucius, okay. I mean, if they loot away a reanimation target now, we can flash in Bowmasters to kill the Priest. Okay, so it doesn't look like they have a reanimation target here. So I'm just going to go Bowmasters, and I think I'm just going to trade with the Crucius here, just to get it off the board. Now this does get punished if they're sandbagging a reanimation target here, but I feel like they probably would have just gone for that before attacks. Actually, maybe they were using this to bait out the second Bowmasters. Maybe this was a really good play from the opponent and I got baited out. It looks like they're still considering something. Yeah, if they... Oh, no. We did get baited out. Okay, that's really bad. So what? I should have just let it go. So what, if I hadn't blocked the Crucius there, we could have flashed in the Bowmasters in response to them looting and killed the Priest of Far Rights. So that was really well sequenced from the opponent. They made me think that they didn't have another reanimation target in hand and then managed to resolve the Atraxa here. So that was definitely a mistake on my part. That was a greedy block, but I don't know. I felt from the way they played, they were kind of giving off they didn't have another reanimation target. I mean, it's still not game over, right? Previously, with old builds of midrange, a resolved Atraxa was super hard to beat, but now with the ring, I think it's definitely possible. We didn't find a land, which is a bit annoying. I think I'm just going to use Abundant Harvest here to try and find a land so that we unlock more mana for future ring turns. You know, it might seem weird cashing in a treasure for a land, but I think it's worth it here potentially. Then we can get Blood Crypt in play. You know, if we didn't have another Crucius, then that line would definitely be worse because then Fatal Push off the top becomes worse. But yeah, I think I definitely did punt this one by not. Well, I should have just let the Crucius hit me and then held on to the Bowmasters. Because now they can despark the ring. I mean, thankfully we have another one, and we have Go for the Throat as well. But we know they have both Unburial Rites and Priest of Fell Rites here as well. So if we go for the Throat, they can just reanimate it straight away. I mean, we can jostle back the Stone of Iraq, but I think I'm just going to go for the One Ring here, cut off their Atraxa for another turn, and then shock in the Blood Crypt, pass back, and then we can wait until their end step, kill the Atraxa, and then go jostle, bring back Stone. And then we have their graveyard back on lock again, which seems pretty good. But they are getting a lot of lands, you know. If as the game goes long against Atraxa or against reanimated decks in general, they can just get to the point where they can start hard casting their reanimation targets, which is kind of scary. Okay, so they have a second Harvester here. I mean, thankfully they don't have mana for Fatal Push anymore, or they don't have mana for Revolt Fatal Push. So we go for the Throat of the Atraxa. And then definitely just going to jam the Jostle here, get back the Stone. And like I said, they don't have a way to get Revolt and Fatal Push here, even if the last card in their hand is Fatal Push. Then we get back the Stone. Unfortunately, we can't afford to play the Crucius here because we need to hold open 2 mana to shut off their reanimation spells. But even though we let an Atraxa resolve, which was definitely a punt on my part, I think we've still got a pretty good shot of winning this. I mean, if they have another, you know, reanimation target in hand, they can fairly easily bait us out activating the Stone. But we at least get to draw a card when we activate Stone, so hopefully that can help us dig towards something else. And I mean, we've still got a pretty stacked hand here, right? We got Shieldred, we got Crucius. So I still feel pretty confident, even though we definitely did make a mistake earlier. Okay, so the Unburial Rites the Atraxa, so that forces us to crack the Stone, and that does unfortunately mean that they still have access to the flashback on Unburial Rites because of the timing of it. And then, yeah, they go after the Jostle because otherwise we could just flashback, go for the Throat with it. Let's see what else they got here. Okay, so then they're using Harvester to take out the Bowmasters, but I guess that then unlocks their blood tokens, you know, means they can use their blood tokens more freely here. And if they do have another reanimation target... Oh, wow, they have another Atraxa. Yikes, okay. So again, we're in trouble here. I think... I don't know, I think... We could go for Crucius, but we can't find an instant speed way of shutting off their graveyard. I don't think. But, I mean, I think getting Crucius online is probably better because we know they're going to be resolving an Atraxa next turn. And I think starting to get more filtering off Crucius could help because we've got the Go for the Throat here that can take out the Actually, I think I'm just going to jam both and discard the will here. So we have the go for the throat to kill the Atraxa. I mean, it's kind of rough. If they go Atraxa and find a Thoughtseize, they can Thoughtseize away, they go for the throat, and then we might be in trouble. But if they don't get a crazy good hit off the Atraxa here, we can potentially go for the throat and then just keep trying to use Crucius to try and find, another piece of graveyard hate. I mean, having said that, if they don't find another way to reanimate, we can just... Oh, okay, they found Unburial Rites, so scratch that. I mean, thankfully they didn't find a Thoughtseize here, so we should still be able to kill the Atraxa with a go for the throat, but it's looking pretty dicey, this game. And they do have Fatal Push here to be able to take out either Shieldred or Crucius here. Okay, they Fragment Reality the Shieldred. And we find a Jarsoul, so that's pretty sick. Now the opponent kind of has to use a Fatal Push here, or we can just flash back a Stone again. I mean, presumably they have to kill the Jarsoul here, right? I mean, they don't know that we have Go for the Throat in hand, but the fact they're looting away probably makes me think they're just trying to trigger a Revolt for Fatal Push. Yeah, so they do kill the Jarsoul here. And now we're kind of in a rough spot because I'm not 100% sure when the best time to use Go for the Throat is. I think we might have to wait till the end of the opponent's turn. Oh, wow, okay, we found another ring. Perfect. So that buys us at least another turn here, which is great. Okay, we'll fire off the Harvest just to try and find something like a Soul Guide Lantern here would be perfect. Okay, Fatal Push, not what we're looking for. So I think here we're just going to go to the end step. Gonna discard the Crucius, name Ambitious here just to try and find a Shieldred. Okay, perfect, we did. And then, we can start gaining life off the one ring so that hopefully the Atraxa can't race us as quickly. And then that buys us more time to draw more off the ring. Now, that does become a lot more risky if the opponent has an answer for the ring here. If they do, then it's probably best to discard Fatal Push. Although, to be honest, what I'm looking for here more than anything else is a piece of graveyard hate so that we can go for the throat of the Atraxa and then just lock off their graveyard. Okay, they do have Crucius, so I'm kind of glad that we have the Fatal Push spare here. Because, especially at this late point in the game, we really don't want them making treasures if possible, because then they can just start hard casting Atraxas. So we take out the Crucius here, and then we could go for the throat at the end step, but I feel like without Graveyard Hate, that just gives them another way to reanimate. So I'm going to wait until my turn and see what we draw. So I was just going to jam the Shieldred and activate the ring here, but Takenuma means that we can go Takenuma Jarsoul, go for the throat, or use Jarsoul to bring back Stone and then go for the throat of the Atraxa and still hold open 2 mana. I think we need an untapped land for that though. Hold on, let me calculate it. So Takenuma's 3 mana, Jarsoul's 3, get back the Stone for free. Yeah, we have exactly enough off that untapped land. So that untapped land was a pretty clutch draw here, right? So we can channel the Takenuma, get back the Jarsoul that has 1 intensity, play the Jarsoul, get back the Stone. Or obviously if we'd milled over a Soul Guide Lantern, that would be even more ideal because then we don't need to hold open 2 mana. But we can go for Jarsoul here. Get back the Stone. And then I'm not sure when's best to use Go for the Throat. I very much doubt they've got any way to protect the Atraxa here, to be honest. So we get back the Stone here. And then we could attack and start applying pressure now. We know they don't have a removal spell for Crucius, and we know they don't have a way to find one either. So I think I'm just going to go for the throat now. And then, obviously, it's vitally important that we use the Crucius, because then we have 2 treasures up. Oh, I guess go for the throat with Stone gets rid of their Atraxa anyway, right? I kind of forgot about that. But either way, even if they find another reanimation target, we still have their graveyard on lock here, right? We still have the 2 treasures available to crack the Stone if we need to. And then, with a 1 ring in play, definitely going to pitch the Fatal Push. Just going to go for Greater here. Wow, and another go for the throat. Great. So I feel a lot better about this spot now. So now we have their graveyard completely on lock with the Stone. They could obviously draw, if they draw like a Serra's Emissary or something here, then we're in trouble. But I think in general, since we're a very interactive deck, Serra's Emissary is very risky for them to bring in. So even if they did draw a reanimation target here, if they do draw an Atraxa, they don't have the treasures to cast it, right? They'd need to get Giganthra to do it. Okay, even with the punt, we managed to get there. Sweet, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, I think we can keep this. Right, we obviously need more lands to hit the one ring, but Triple Thoughtseize should hopefully slow the opponent down. Oh wow, we found a Crucius as well. So as long as we can find a third land here, I think we're pretty good. Okay, so we're against Rakdos, and the opponent has a pretty stacked hand here, to be honest. I think I'm kind of inclined to take the Inquisition, because if we let them Inquisition, they take our Crucius, and then our hand becomes a lot worse. So opponent passes back, presumably with Bowmasters. Okay, so we found the land. Now, we could go for double Thoughtseize here. The risk of doing that is if they find another 3-drop off the top, then we immediately fall far behind. So I'm hoping they tap out for Crucius here. If they tap out for Fable instead, that's obviously not ideal, but we can still go for the Throat, the 2/2, and then double Thoughtseize. I mean, if they do go for Fable, maybe we should have just gone for the double Thoughtseize last turn. Yeah. So they do go for Fable, which is a pretty good play from the opponent. So maybe I should have gone for double Thoughtseize. I mean, this way around, we can still tag the Crucius and the Heartless Axe, but they get to loot with the Fable. So yeah, I think in hindsight, I think I got too greedy there. I was basically hoping that they would go for the Crucius. So we can get rid of the Crucius and the Heartless Axe, so it's not too bad, but they do get the loot of the Fable here, so they could potentially dig towards another One Ring or another Crucius or something. So I think on balance that was probably a slight misplay on my part. I probably should have just gone for the double Thoughtseize, taken Fable, taken Crucius, but then they're left with Heartless Act, which makes our Crucius a lot worse. So it's close. Maybe, yeah. Think about it. I don't mind the go for the throat play that much, because if they do play Crucius, they get max punished for it, and if we do go for double Thoughtseize, we probably have to take Fable, Crucius, in which case they're left with the Heartless Act, so they then have an answer to my Crucius. And like, maybe it's results-oriented thinking, but I kind of prefer the spot we're in now, because we have Crucius unanswered now, which puts us in a really good spot. But yeah, I think it's definitely close. I might go back and rewatch it just to think about the pros and cons of each play. Definitely going to fire off the Fatal Push on the Fable here. We really don't want them copying Bowmasters if possible. They do get to take our Bowmasters, which is a little bit rough, but we don't have the One Ring, so we don't really need to worry about that. So going to lead on Abundant Harvest, naming non-land here. And while we are at a low life total, especially now we found Fatal Push, I don't actually mind this spot, because now we have an answer to all their creatures. Wow, we found Shielded off the top as well. So like, this is the, I wanted to try and build with that go for the throat play a scenario where we got to resolve our Crucius and dealt with the opponents, and we have managed to end up in that situation. So I'm pretty happy with how things have played out here. So definitely just going to jam the Shielded, especially now they've got a Hive of the Eye Tyrant. And then I think I'm just going to pitch Jarsel, naming Ambitious, because we don't really need lands here. And we do find a One Ring, which obviously isn't great when the opponent has double Bowmasters, but we can, at worst, we can always just use that to... We can always just pitch it to Crucius to find a Will, steal one of their Bowmasters. Wow, opponent fires up the Hive, so... I mean, I guess they're trying to pressure us down pretty quickly. I think it's probably worth Fatal Pushing the Hive. Now, that does mean that we're slightly soft to an opponent's Shieldred, but I feel like if they had a Shieldred, they probably would have just played it this turn. Maybe not, though. Hard. Another land, but it's a creature land. So I think I'm just going to run out the tap lands here and then just ditch One Ring, name Ambitious, and then we have access to Will that we can guaranteed cast next turn, no matter what the opponent draws. So we can steal Bowmasters. If they do draw a Shielded or One Ring, we can steal theirs. Okay, looks like they probably didn't draw anything that great if they're firing up the Den, so I feel like we've got pretty good blocks here, right? We can block the Den, block the 2/2. I think I'm more concerned with preserving life total than trying to kill the Bowmasters here, because again, we don't have the One Ring, so we don't need to really worry about the Bowmasters at this point. But I think I'm just going to use Will, steal their Bowmasters, and then I think we can start attacking back here, right? The worst that can happen is they have a Shielded or a removal spell, in which case we're only taking 2, right? So I think we can start racing back here now, and then, we get another Crucius trigger here, and then just ship it back. And now the opponent probably can't afford to attack anymore. And we're in a really commanding position now. Getting to keep our Crucius in play and dealing with the opponents was really the key here, I think. Okay, so I think we just attack with everything here, right? They could have a removal spell take out the Shielded, but we've still got pretty good attacks. And then, even if they block twice, we can just activate Will to get a second combat phase, right? We can activate Specialized Will, sack the Bowmasters, discard the Stomping Grounds to just get another combat phase here. So yeah, sack the Bowmasters, attacking again with the Will, and that should do it. Sweet, we got there, nice. So, sideboarding against Rakdos, faces matchup a million times because it's so popular on the ladder right now. Bring in the 3 Haywire Might, go down 2 Harvest, down 1 Thoughtseize, and just ship it back. But yeah, I've felt pretty good with this build. I feel like we really get an edge in terms of tempo with Jarsil. We really get an edge in terms of consistency with the Harvest. And I also really like Haywire Might in this matchup as well because, you know, it gives us a consistent way to deal with the One Ring that we can loop with Jarsil. Also gains us some life back. Is a creature which we can block with and apply pressure with as well. So I definitely have felt like I've got a big edge against the straight Rakdos builds with this particular Jund build. You know, I think Jarsil is the biggest reason. I mean, having said that, you know, I think Harvest is a really big reason in terms of consistency. You know, lack of consistency definitely loses you mid-range mirrors a lot of the time, but Jarsil is definitely the card that I've felt has given me the biggest edge. So this hand's pretty sweet, right? A little bit slow, but in these mirror matches, it's not the end of the world if your hand's a bit slow. As long as you have answers for Crucius and, you know, some plan for Shielded or One Ring, you're in pretty good spot. And we have the go for the throat here in case they do go for Crucius. Gonna let them hit us with the Bowmasters first because, you know, if they do have Crucius, we really want to go for the throat before it hits the first trigger. And then I think I'm happy just going for Bowmasters here. Kill their Bowmasters, and then hopefully we can resolve Crucius. Okay, sick. Opponent goes for Bowmasters. I feel like this is a mistake on their part. There's no real advantage for them to play Bowmasters now, right? You know, there's no way Jund is running protection spells of any sort. And now they've tapped out, I know for sure that I can just jam Crucius. You know, if they'd waited until I attack, I guess we could have attacked first, at which point they probably want a Bowmasters, but they could just let the damage through and then wait, and then I'm less likely to go for Crucius because they're representing, you know, Heartless Act or something like that. Okay, they do have a One Ring of, sorry, a One Ring of their own, but we do have Shieldred, so interesting spot here whether we want to go for our own One Ring or just jam the Shieldred. I think there's a risk of going Shieldred first because the opponent can just kill it, in which case we start falling behind on card advantage pretty quickly, but I think I'm still going to jam it and just start applying pressure here because if they don't have an immediate answer for the Shieldred, then we're fine. Maybe that's a misplay though. Maybe we're supposed to just jam our own One Ring first and then go for Shieldred afterwards. Yeah, they do have the Heartless Act, so I think it's close though, right? Because if they don't have exactly Heartless Act there, we really start applying enough pressure. Or like, even if they go Crucius and have a Fatal Push, we can still go for the Throat It. So we did get punished by exactly Heartless Act, and I do think it's close. There is definitely an argument for going for the Throat first, but... And they do have Thoughtseize, so... Yeah, we are getting kind of punished here, but... You know, if they didn't have exactly Heartless Act there, Shielded really starts applying pressure to their life total. So now we're kind of forced to go for our own One Ring, and we are definitely behind at this point. So on balance, maybe it was better to go for our One Ring first and then go for Shielded afterwards. It's definitely close though. So they're representing another Bowmasters here. I don't think it's worth blocking with the Crucius because they just flash in the Bowmasters and kill it. But I will chump block with the 1/1 because if we are going for One Ring... Jarsil is interesting, but doesn't really do that much here. I think I'm just going to jam the One Ring. Now, we are like 2 turns behind their One Ring activations, and yeah, surprise, surprise, they have the second Bowmasters here. They were kind of telegraphing it a little bit, but... So we are definitely playing from behind here pretty heavily. Going to kill one of their Bowmasters with the go for the throat before we activate the One Ring. So they still get a single Bowmasters trigger, but... I think we just want to start drawing now before they have the opportunity to flash in even more Bowmasters. And we didn't draw a land, which is pretty rough. Might as well attack here because we have protection from the ring. So yeah, I think we probably... Oh, I'm going to discard Jarsil, name Ambitious. But yeah, we maybe got punished for playing the Shielded first before the One Ring. But I don't know. I feel like if they don't have Heartless Axe, we really put a lot of pressure on their life total. Whereas if we just go for the One Ring, we're just playing a turn behind, which I think is probably fine with a Shielded in hand, but I think going for Shielded first is definitely a higher upside play, if that makes sense. So, going to lead on Harvest first here just to see what we hit. Oh, okay, that's really good. That was a great hit. So now we can go Fatal Push, kill the Shieldred, Jarsil, Fatal Push the Bowmasters. And now I feel like we've actually got a good chance here. So even though, again, I'm not 100% sure whether playing Shielded or One Ring first was correct a few turns ago, I think we might have a really good way to recover now. So now I think... I mean, there's definitely an argument to holding on to the second One Ring to be able to legend rule it, but with their One Ring in play, I want to just go for Will to try and steal theirs. And then if they do have another one, we can Haywire Might it. Now, they are drawing an insane amount of cards, so there's a reasonable chance they just go for double Thoughtseize and we're in real trouble here, but you know, I still feel like we've got a pretty good shot. If we can steal their One Ring, that's great. You know, we're on Jarsil with 2 intensity, so we can go for the throat any creatures that they play as well. I think we just have to let this through, which is kind of risky, particularly if they have follow up with a Shieldred here, because we are essentially down at 7 because of the One Ring. Okay, so they do have Inquisition. They take the Bowmasters, which I guess makes sense. That makes me think they don't have a second One Ring in hand if they're scared of Bowmasters ahead of the Haywire Might. Okay, Seasoned Pyromancer. I mean, I guess they want to get that in play now before we draw another Bowmasters. But if that's all they've got, I think we're in a pretty good spot here, right? We can steal their One Ring and keep ours. And then we've got Haywire Might that we can potentially use to either exile a ring if they have drawn another one, or potentially just use Haywire Might to kill our own ring if we're going down too low on life total. So it looks like they do have Fatal Push here. Or they just set a stop in case they found it anyway. And they do take out the Jarsil, which makes sense, right? Because otherwise we just flashback, go for the throat. And if they kill the Crucius, then we can flashback when we hit 3 intensity as well. So I think with the Haywire Might, I'm pretty happy to just activate the One Ring. You know, at worst, we can go Will steal theirs and then still Haywire Might to kill ours. So interesting spot. We can just go Haywire Might, exile theirs. I'm worried about dying on the crackback here, though. We are at 7 life, so we do need to be careful of our life total, particularly with the One Ring in play. I mean, we can potentially use Haywire Might to chump block and then kill our own One Ring in response, but since we drew the Jarsil, I think I'm happier just going Haywire Might, exile the opponent's ring, and then, you know, ideally I don't want to be shocking in one of these stomping grounds if possible, but we might end up having to. I mean, either way, I think I'm just going to go Jarsil here. And then we could either get back a Haywire Might or just Fatal Push. I think Fatal Pushing their Crucius makes a lot more sense here. And then we've still got access to Fatal Push, so if the opponent does go for an all-out attack, we can kind of blow them out in combat a little bit here, right? We can use Crucius to get rid of the Stomping Ground, and then if they do attack with everything, we can just block the Pyro, block a token, and then use Fatal Push to kill the the 4/4 Orcs. They do have Liliana of the Veil, so they can take out one of our creatures here. Which is the more important one here? I mean, honestly, Jarsil seems pretty important because we can use it to get back a Bowmasters or a Go for the Throat, and then use Jarsil to get back a Crucius the following turn. So I think I'm going to get rid of the Crucius here. And then I think they're more likely to attack now. Now we've only got 1 creature in play, which does mean they could get blown out by the Fatal Push. They do have another One Ring, which is, you know, we've got the Will in hand as an answer immediately, which is pretty sick. So they activate the ring. See what else they got here. Okay, Den of the Bugbear. So they do have 2 creature lands, which we need to be wary of. And they do attack with everything, which I think is pretty good for us, right? We can just block the Pyromancer and then push the 4/4 before damage. So we only go down to 8 here. And then next turn, we've got enough mana to steal their ring, draw 4, and specialize as well. Okay, Shielded is obviously a good draw, but even if we hadn't drawn Shielded, we could still draw 4, use Will to steal theirs, and then specialize to sack ours. So now we draw a bunch of cards. Now we don't even need to go for the throat. We can potentially get back a Bowmasters with the Jarsil here. Kill the Liliana of the Veil. And now, even though we let them, you know, untap with a ring in play, we have both Shielded and Bowmasters now. So, and then we can use Jarsil to get back a Crucius next turn. We have Go for the Throat in case they have a Shielded of their own. And I'm going to play an untapped land here, just in case we need to Besage one of their lands, right? If they try and fire up a creature land, we can Besage it, and we can still have mana for Go for the Throat as well. Okay, so they channel Takenuma. Do they have a Shielded in the graveyard? Presumably. So, if that is their whole turn, just get back Shielded player. We can just kill the Shielded in response to the ring trigger, and then I far ahead at that point, right? So they do get back Shielded. And if they just activate the ring here, I feel like we're in a pretty sick spot to win. Yeah, they do go for it, so we can just kill the shielded in response. And now they take... Yeah, sweet. Opponent just keeps up. So even though we potentially made a mistake early on, we still managed to recover from behind there, which is pretty sick.